Hi, Sue. It's been a little bit, and I'll just briefly touch on why. Firstly, death in the family, kind of first time dealing with that, it's been interesting. Secondly, I moved households, and it's just been a bit to get used to that. But through all that sort of downtime, I've reflected a bit, and I've come to realize that I don't really enjoy streaming, and it felt like I had to force myself to make this the sort of content that I was creating. And I wouldn't necessarily mind that as much, but a lot of it was just sort of stuff I was making for the sake of making. It wasn't really stuff that I enjoyed doing as much. It was like, oh, maybe this will be successful, maybe that'll be fun, and maybe I could actually, get some connection through that. But obviously that wasn't very successful, and, I've come to refocus a bit, and going forward what I'm going to be doing is most likely just a series of podcasts. And the main goal with these podcasts will be to cover a mix of competitive and casual content. So for the competitive side of things, it's probably what I'm going to be starting out with in videos. And I'm going to be covering staff changes in the North American and probably Australian scene, maybe some community drama in those competitive scenes, and just sort of letting people know what's up, letting people know the state of the competitive scenes a little bit, giving some perspective. And then, for the wider regions as a whole of Highlander, I'm probably going to be going over, playoffs a little bit when, seasons are ending, and just generally speaking, bridging the gap a little bit, giving people a general idea of what's happening and when in those scenes. Because they are pretty niche, to be fair, and I think it's nice to just be on the same page about things. So, to start off with, I'm going to be covering the North American content for the week. As you can see here, North American playoffs just recently finished. In first place, you had Wishmode coming in. Very strong DM team, a lot of coordination, a lot of powerful players, and a decent few of them have played together for a bit now. Just sort of the same general circles of friends, so of course they're getting a pretty good synergy, and the main thing is that they're able to just out-DM a lot of people. Second up, you have Man Crush Monday. Now this team, I would say, not as good DM, but they do have some pretty interesting strategies. Ultimately, in the end, though, they just didn't really have the raw mechanical skill to compete with players like Wish, Demento, AGB, and either Nixie or Lenny, whoever Wishmode had on Sniper for the week. Now, Man Crush Monday, they do have pretty good players, but Wishmode, their players have sort of been around the very top for a while now, and there's a good reason for that. But second place out of all the North American teams, as you can see here, is still pretty respectable, yeah. Then you have Somebody Help. Now these people, my favorite team in Invite by far. A lot of these people, super trustworthy, super good friends, and very nice people that have known each other for a while, that really love each other's company, and that just sort of play to play. They're not really necessarily looking for wins as much, and they have some pretty good talent to be going along with that. But definitely my favorites, yeah. Yee. Now, they're a bit... Well, actually at this point they've been around for a few seasons, and they're kind of another one of those sorts of friend group teams where they just generally sort of stick to their sphere of people rather than just recruiting the best of the best. That being said, they usually do kind of go for the best on something like Sniper, for instance. But, they're a pretty decent team. They made playoffs, unfortunately weren't able to place, but it's pretty stiff competition at the top. You have Amigos. Some real questionable people on that team, in my opinion, or at least in their past iterations, but they do have some pretty decent mechanics, and they're learning how to play together pretty well. Run It Back. I think they have a bit of a mixed bag as a roster, but most of them are pretty good friends, pretty nice people. You love to see them. You love to see it. Now, worst comp format. Move Up team. A lot of the players, it's their first or second season in Invite, and they're sort of a newly forming team, yeah. But, pretty good to see them. For them, they have BBL, heavy player, kind of at the center of the team, kind of just, everybody's playing around him, everybody's coordinating around him, and they just are really good at following that one sort of vision, but a lot of their players also are kind of like pretty individualistic and aggressive, and that's pretty fun to see, but unfortunately, that doesn't really cut it against the top of the top. Now you have two pastas and a side salad. A lot of things I could say, but to be polite here, I'm just gonna say it in a few words. They've been around the middle-ish advanced to lower bottom invite range for a while now. They're pretty alright people, although they do, again, like have a tendency to pick up some questionable people as subs. But they just don't really have the raw mechanics or the clarity of comms to really perform that well. But I mean, they're pretty decent. Still, might be bottom of invite, but that's still invite, which is something nice. Now, Froggyland here. Big mistake on this RGL staff's part. I don't know why these teams keep getting to just throw around in qualifiers, just get off without punishment, and then get allowed to just sandbag in advanced and stable super easily. I felt like the same sort of issue was around back when RGL had Challenger, and it's just oh well. I'll get back to that in a little bit, but Volmatic's adminning at adminship, not that clean. You can see here, you have Swiss Advanced, round robin invite. Both these should be round robin here. Anyways, so Froggyland, huge invite sandbagger team. A lot of their players have invite experience, could easily play an invite, have easily played an invite before, and should really not be allowed to just be rolling in advanced. Not really like of a decision, I'm afraid. Five Nights at Gortz. A lot of these players, they know each other, they're decent friends, and they have really good mechanics. What I'd say is they're Koth product players, and that works out really well. But you go against invite players, and you go against invite players. Thanks, RGL admins. That's great. These people should have won. Team name? Not very familiar with them personally, but a lot of these players, they're pretty questionable as people, but they do have pretty good mechanics, and they're just sort of one of those teams. It's like roll or be rolled, bit of a weak mental, you know how it goes. Broken Mice, they've been around for a decent few seasons around I want to say just the middle of mid-advanced. Some seasons they've done better in, some seasons they've done worse in. You see RGL add this kind of recently, but yeah, they're a pretty respectable team. You love to see a team that actually belongs in the division be in a division. And making playoffs out of, let's see, I guess 9 teams at this point. Not bad. Of course, originally you had a few more teams, they kind of died out as well, so I guess it'd be something closer to 12 teams initially. But, just the fact that you survived there, that's a thumbs up in my book. We love Lean. A lot of move-up-ish players, a very mixed bag team. In the sense of, a lot of the players are relatively equal when it comes to skill, it's just very much a melting pot of sorts, though, right? You just have a lot of different players coming together. 9:30 bedtime. Very older player-y team. Don't really have the raw mechanics, are decent at coordination, but again, pretty nice people. Kind of along the same lines of somebody help, they got the drip. And to go back for a little bit, I just wanted to stay on this screen to give a bit of a wider image, but I'll go and just show you the rosters real quick now. Really strong players top the game. Wish mode. Man Crush Monday, you also see a lot of really powerful names that have been around for a while, but they did have a lot of roster changes, and they do normally kind of go through a decent few rosters throughout the seasons. Right. So you can see here, pretty good though. Pretty good record. See if Wish Mode has any. It doesn't, but it's just kind of another one of the same iterations of players. Like Wish, Demento, so on and so forth. Lenny, so on and so forth, yeah. You can see. Pretty decent past. Again, they've been around for a decently long while, probably like one of the longest past season records, and They're a pretty solid team, yeah. Pretty solid people. Run it back. A lot of the old B&H players, pretty good people, pretty good players. They did have a lot of prior iterations, but RGL doesn't really track it. RGL's weird like that. You can see here, Amigos, decent few past seasons together. They're now kind of another one of those yee-ish teams. Pretty good regardless. Worst comp format. They did have some past iterations, but they are not really the same team as they once were. But anyways, I really just want to spotlight these guys for a bit. They've been coming together kind of freshly, a lot of players just mixing together, and they have done really well. Nugget, Jolo, Rez, I love Rez, by the way, pretty nice Pyro, takes initiative a lot, one of the goofier guys in the community, love him. Norful on demo, that's a pretty powerful play. Norful is a pretty big presence overall. Always is also willing to like take a bit of a backseat and just coordinate a bit. And then BBL Heavy, really the center of the team, along with their Sniper Mountain. Both pretty good players. I will say BBL does have a little bit of a tendency to go on like questionable flankish plays though, and I want to say that's like a bit of an issue with the team as a whole. Like they get a bit baity, and they just sort of go off on their own a bit. But anyways, you have matches on Medic and Elar and Spy. So pretty solid team, especially for just like people kind of playing together for the first time and fresh roster coming together. Now this team, take a look at this. Why is this team in advanced? Why? Look at all these players. The SAR, invite level sniper, pretty good on scout as well. Rebel, pretty much invite level on anything. Red, invite level on soldier. Mako, really solid demo man. Fine to be in advanced though. It's a big, pretty darn good on like 6's DM based classes. Kind of half and half. Ultu, I believe, was the sub. Moosiness, invite medic. Highlander, solid invite multiclasser. Percy, solid invite player, but as a sub. Supreme Toad, invite on basically everything again. Wax, invite on most things. Again, it's just really weird to see this team be placed in advanced and to see them just kind of roll along for most of it. A high impact dolphin, invite level engineer, played an invite a few seasons in the past, and you see invite team. Like this iteration of the roster, look. Invite players. That's all I gotta say. 3 to 4 an invite, not that bad. This is Five Nights at Gort's. You can see a lot of these people do kind of play together, and a lot of these people are like very active pug players. And honestly, that does give them a decent bit of a DM advantage. It's just you can't always rely on that unless you're wish mode. You can see team name, as like I've showcased before. A lot of interesting community figures and members. Broken Mice, and a lot of the same sorts of players. We lovely, and 9:30 bedtime. Now I am going to, let's see. Oh yes, this. So you can see here, Wilmatic was the previous RGL head admin in the past, for the past, like I want to say, 2-3 seasons. He made a lot of really questionable decisions, unbanned some really harmful community influences because they're his friends, made a lot of decisions that did hurt the league for the sake of his friends and his team. Meanwhile, I'm placed into the advance just for my team to die for like the 3rd or 4th time in a row. Really good decisions. But, anyways, yeah. Just a really, I want to say, corrupt, racist as well, hangs out with a lot of those individuals. There's other allegations that I'm not going to delve into. But, just lots of really questionable things that aren't the best look, especially when they do actively influence your league in an authoritative position. But, also, advanced being Swiss for, like, the 4th, I don't even know at this point. There was a thread about it every season. Let me see if I can find some of those threads. But people were like, don't do RG, don't do Swiss, don't do Swiss. for advanced. It's the second to top of the game. And, you know, it kept being Swiss! Look at all this! No more Swiss. Why not a smaller season? You have all these things. New season, same thread. So true, so true. I'm really not going to go into detail here because there are other things to talk about. This is another kind of essay on it, though, just talking about the flaws of Advanced. And one of the big takeaways is that it gave teams some kind of free-ish wins and plays, and it just really allowed for teams that shouldn't be in playoffs or shouldn't have the ranking they do have to have an easier schedule than teams that were more deserving. And that's had a pretty harmful influence. And you just really want teams that kind of belong around the advanced level playing in that level and competing against each other. This is the most recent thread. This one you see a lot of community frustrations and a lot of people just sort of venting their anger. Frustrations, some band players, of course. You love to see it. A lot of frustrations against Fullmatic here. And, yeah, just pretty interesting stuff. A lot of old community tensions and mistrust kind of folding in as one. And, you know, when you keep having the same issues pointed out, I'm going to switch over to casual for a little bit while I talk about this. When you keep having a lot of the same issues pointed out, a lot of the same harm done, and it's being perpetuated by the very top of the league, which one of the most influential figures in the North American community, of course, you're going to see a big lack of trust. You're going to see a lot of people complaining and never being appeased, and just more and more pressure building up, especially when you create a lot of these issues, though, and you don't really do anything to resolve them. People point out an issue, you keep making the same mistakes, there's going to be a lack of a trust there, and that's one of the biggest things that kind of divides and hurts the North American community these days when it comes to competitive. You know. And kind of going along with that, we're finally seeing something pretty good for the North American Highlander community. Wilmatic, after that last fight, pretty much no longer going to be the head admin for RGO Highlander. Now it's constantly. Really trustworthy guy, really good friend of mine. Always tries to have better judgment in mind, is really willing to listen to input, doesn't really hang around a lot of the same harmful groups that somebody like Wilmatic does, for instance. And in general is just a really good person to be able to heal the trust, to be able to heal the divide, and to be a responsible community figure. Very much looking forward to that. I think it's a great thing for the North American Highlander scene. Something interesting, Michael Ailey, one of the other really good invite Highlander players, community figures, they'll point out, previous Oracle head admin as well, is that the Sixes side of the North American Highlander seed used to have a kind of weak, mediocre-ish Sixes staff, and that he ran a really tight ship for Highlander, and I'm kind of that was also on the previous thread, I believe, that I was showing, but I'm kind of inclined to agree with that, but then something interesting he noted is that it pretty much just flipped around, that Highlander became the incapable, enabling laughingstock of the North American scene, where Wall Sixes became, like, super efficient, a super tight ship. And it's just good to potentially see both of those being better now. The Sixes team went such a long way in healing trust with their new admins and Virgil becoming head admin for it, and it's just been a really good time in general for them. And hopefully things will get better now for North American Highlander as well. You do see a lot of technical growth on paper, or at least in the past seasons while quarantine was going on, people are going back into the game. You see a lot of teams. But it wasn't necessarily that healthy, because you just see the community itself becoming a lot weaker and a lot more problematic. A lot of the people that did used to care and tried to fight against this issues sort of like burnt out, or just sort of following those same sorts of issues, especially due to like a lack of trust and sort of dejection due to a lot of these issues being pointed out and either being enabled and helped by the admins or just not being resolved out of neglect. But anyways, I can't stress enough how constantly as the head admin for North American Highlander is a good thing and is something you should be really optimistic about. And maybe if you were dejected by the community in the past, now is the time to try and make some change again, because constantly really the type of person to listen. Anyways, moving on from that tangent, a little bit long-winded I know, but a lot of pent-up frustrations. What what we're gonna go into next is a little bit of European Highlander. I don't really have as much to say about European Highlander. I don't really know as much about them, but what you see here is Super Dickman's Cannon entering into Premiership playoffs, and then you're either going to be seeing Fela or Envision coming in as second here versus them, or rather as the second team here versus them, so you're looking at Grand Finals coming up soon. All three of these teams, very long-lasting Highlander teams, very solid players. Thing about Fela, though, in specific, they have some really questionable leadership decisions. A lot of the time, they just sort of put the blame on a few players or just completely shift their roster around every season. And when you compare that to a team like Super Digman's Kinnigan, or maybe even Envision, I believe has better mechanics, but not as solid coordination-wise as Super Digman's, you really are shooting yourself in the foot because you just don't give the same group of players time to develop together. You're always just sort of pushing the blame around, never really looking at the issues that you yourself are more than likely causing. And so, you just don't really solve things ever. And your opponents get stronger, while you just side grade a lot of the time. Here you got Division 1 playoffs, not familiar with these teams, but you can see again coming into finals, and again coming into finals. So what you're seeing is, pretty soon, just an ending of the European Highlander season. You already saw an ending of the North America Highlander season, so that's coming up in a month or two next season, yep. And it's gonna be pretty exciting, you know, always a good time to get into competitive. A lot of players around these days, even if it's not necessarily the healthiest. But definitely worth looking into. It's not that hard to get into a team in the lower divisions, especially these days. You can just look on the RGL forums, well not really the RGL forums, but RGL Discord really, which is very accessible, or the ETF12 forums. Or even if you just make some friends, it's pretty easy to just get a team started and progress your way through the game. South America, as far as I'm aware, hasn't really had Highlander in a bit now. They used to have a lot of corruption and whatnot in the past, and a lot of cheating especially, that sort of killed the health of the game. They do have a decent few players, but they have pretty poor network infrastructure down there compared to North America and Europe. The thing about Europe that's pretty interesting is you have all these different countries, but for the most part you can get around like 70 and 90, maybe like 1 and 140 if you're like more Eastern European or Russian. And it's just really nice seeing the connections be pretty decent all around. North America, pretty similar story, pretty decent ping, pretty decent connection, you know. But players do love to complain about West Coast to East Coast ping, maybe something like from like 60 to 90 usually, and we're just kind of very entitled to ping. You know, it's not without reason though, but yeah, you look at South America and you'll see players like get upwards of 100 ping to their own region and sometimes even less to North America. So that was one of the big things, definitely. Having ping, not always necessarily the most impactful thing for hit scam, but if you're not used to it, it really impacts like projectile classes and something like specialists a lot more. And if you're not as well versed in Highlander, it's just very difficult to kind of get a start out if you only ever have bad connection, bad ping, and whatnot. It's just one of those things you really take for granted until you have a poor experience with. So anyways, moving on. Yeah, South American Highlander, pretty dead, I'm pretty sure. I don't think there's been a season a bit now, at least as far as I'm aware, but at least a few of the players do kind of like play in North American Highlander RGL from time to time, and that's nice. Let's see. Asian Highlander, I want to say it's a bit of a similar-ish case. Different issues, but again, it's never really like gotten off that much when it comes to like Highlander. A lot of the players just don't really care as much, and it's a pretty decently small player pool, and it really isn't helped by some interregional connection issues. But something definitely interesting when it comes to Asian Highlander is they've been kind of integrating with Australian Highlander more in a community sense, at least. A lot of the Asian groups were kind of dead, had issues like racism and whatnot, just never really got their footing off, didn't really have the infrastructure to, I guess, or the will to, or the people to. Big thing about these community groups is that it really takes a few people to get it off. It really it really just depends on the character and strength of the person, and you're not always going to have it, especially in more niche or like dejected regions, right? And that's, I guess, one of the big things I want to talk about with RGL is that community change has to happen on a community-wide level. You have to do your part in order for things to change, and you have to kind of step up because a lot of the time other people won't. So it's just sort of one of those things where it's like you can complain, and with somebody like Wilmatic, there was definitely room to complain. But with people who actually care and who have the best interests of the community in mind, who want to put the effort in, you really just gotta do your part. You gotta help them find issues rather than just pinning the blame on them and pointing out issues. Anyways, to get back to the matter at hand, with Asia, they've recently been kind of integrating with a group known as Bakes Pugs recently, which is pretty good. I definitely recommend that if you're in the Asian or Australian regions. Very accommodating group, very mixed player base, and a really friendly place overall, really good admins. I help out around there from time to time. Not really as much these days, though, but they are very trustworthy people, and it's a very good place to spend your time. They're actively spending a lot of time into it, and it's an organized sort of thing where it's like you sign up and it'll happen in advance. They balance it out. They put a lot of time and effort into it. It's not as much of just a thing where, oh, let's just do funny pugs, pick teams now. They plan out in advance through signups, and they ensure that it's a bit balanced. They take your performance into account, and it's just a great experience all around. Even as a player with 200 to 300 ping, I enjoyed it, though I haven't been doing it as much these days. But anyways, if you're an Asian or Australian player, definitely something to look forward to. I guess the cap covers it for Australia as well a little bit, but you can see here, Australia struggles a lot with player base because it's usually just sort of like Australia, New Zealand, maybe occasionally Asian players coming in, but it's just sort of, in Australia it's a lot more isolated, and this did sort of hurt the development of competitor for a while, but recently it's like, some have been getting reviews from like foreign players like Bolameo, for instance, has been a huge help for, I believe, Reckless Rascals. Also there's just Rascals, and in general they're just like pretty helpful to have around, but those sorts of resources haven't been accessible as much until recently, and that's another very important part of just knowing what's going on in other regions, sort of being familiar with them. It really allows for more development across regions, especially with like how different regions and different players approach different classes and play styles. It's very interesting. I've touched that in a document before, so I'm not going to go into it too much here. But it's a really great thing, and it's really where the strength and diversity of Highlander shines. So anyways, yeah. It's mostly just players from the same region, so you're not going to see too many players compared to something like South America, Europe, or North America, where it's like massive continents with a lot of different countries coming in. They're just very geographically isolated, relatively speaking, and there's no differences compared to other regions where it's to North America, and also just ping makes it a bit less appealing for foreign players. Although I myself did enjoy it for a decent bit. Australians, super fun people to be around, super nice people for the most part. Really enjoyable time. Probably my favorite group to play with. But yeah, so one div this season and previous seasons, they would occasionally have two divs that kind of alternated. It was one div, I believe, for a bit before COVID. With COVID, though, it became two divs for a bit, but now players are starting to sort of filter out again. And if you're an Australian player looking to get in, it's a great time, and it would really help the scene out. It's like having one div isn't the best thing. It means all like the different skill, like the top of the game in a region facing what's relatively, well, not even relatively, essentially the bottom of it, and it's just not that great of a thing. Hey, look, it's another team name. But yeah, one div, kind of interesting, different from most other regions. So you have VIP Club coming in first place. A lot of like the more puggy Australian players, really good DM, though all around solid players. They came in first place. Reckless Rascals. They've been around for a long time. Season 11 through Season 7 at this point. So it's like a year or two or so. Let me see if we have Club had past seasons. No, it's just sort of like one of those pug teams. You get a new team every season. Same sorts of iterations, so I'm not actually sure how far back that goes. But again, you just generally see those sorts of teams where it's like ad hoc people coming together. So they definitely have really good coordination, but the thing is, if teams just have like really, really good mechanics, then it can be pretty easy for your strategies to just get locked down, or your most important players to just not be able to do as much, especially if they're on more supportive classes. I was actually on this team for a bit in preseason, but I believe code made some changes, and now the default is like you get 300 ping instead of 200, at least for me, like on the East Coast, which wasn't very fun as demo, but I'll tell you what. But there's the option to like increase, like to decrease the ping level. I believe it makes servers more secure as well. Oh yes, they changed the server providers, and that was kind of interesting. But yeah, this is also a bit of an issue for the Asian players. But at least in groups like Bakes Pugs these days, they use the feature to lower the ping again. But anyways, it's really kind of annoying because like it was a really fun time. The team really benefited from having a more vocal for personality, more experience. But yeah, it just kind of came to an end with that, and most teams just were incapable of clicking a few buttons. But anyways, this team has kind of played together a bit in the past. Really nice people. Pretty good, yeah. I believe they switched somebody like Melons to demo afterwards. But yeah, they've played together a bit in the past. Yeah, season 11, season 10. They have a different roster though, but not bad at all. And then, coming in fourth place, bottom of playoffs, you have Wall Inspectors, the Wasteman team. It's usually a bit of a mix of players, but again, they're usually pretty strong mechanically. They played together for a decent few seasons, but all that synergy doesn't necessarily go that far because it's just so mechanically focused. A lot of the time, their game winning is just Wasteman, their medic crits Kriegs, their demo man, which these days is user. He does a ton for the team, very mechanically focused and good. And I'm probably gonna call it there for the time being. Actually, I'll probably record another one in a bit, just talking about other Team Fortress 2, not necessarily League related things, or just commentary of the game in general. I'm not sure, but I do have to get going now, so yeah, have a good one. Hope you enjoyed it.